Alrighty, good evening, Jordan. We'll be starting with chapter 6. That night, I was smiling to myself as I fluffed up my pillow and slid into bed. I was thinking about how terrified Josh had been that afternoon, how frightened he looked, even after I came prancing down the stairs, perfectly okay, how angry he was that I'd fooled him. Of course, Mom and Dad didn't think it was funny. They were both nervous and upset because the moving van had just arrived, an hour late. They forced Josh and me to call a truce. No more scaring each other. It's hard not to get scared in this creepy old place, Josh muttered. But he reluctantly agreed not to play any more jokes on each other, if we could possibly help it. The men, complaining about the rain, started carrying in all of our furniture. Josh and I helped show them where we wanted stuff in our small rooms. They dropped my dresser on the stairs, but it only got a small scratch. The furniture looked strange and small in this big house. Josh and I tried to stay out of the way while Mom and Dad worked all day, arranging things, emptying cartons, putting clothes away. Mom even managed to get the curtains hung in my room. What a day! Now, a little after 10 o'clock, trying to get to sleep for the first time in my new room, I turned onto my side, then onto my back. Even though this was my old bed, I couldn't get comfortable. Everything seemed so different, so wrong. The bed didn't face the same direction as in my old bedroom. The walls were bare. I hadn't had time to hang any of my posters. The room seemed so large and empty. The shadows seemed so much darker. My back started to itch. And then I suddenly felt itchy all over. The bed is filled with bugs, I thought, sitting up. Of course, that was ridiculous. It was my same old bed with clean sheets. I forced myself to settle back down and close my eyes. Sometimes, when I can't get to sleep, I count silently by twos, picturing each number in my mind as I think it. It usually helps to clear my mind so that I can drift off to sleep. I tried it now, burying my face in the pillow, picturing the numbers rolling past. 4, 6, 8. I yawned loudly, still wide awake at 2:20. I'm going to be awake forever, I thought. I'm never going to be able to sleep in this new room. But then, I must have drifted off without realizing it. I don't know how long I slept, an hour or two at the most. It was a light, uncomfortable sleep. Then something woke me. I sat straight up, startled. Despite the heat of the room, I felt cold all over. Looking down to the end of the bed, I saw that I had kicked off the sheet and light blanket. With a groan, I reached down for them, but then froze. I heard whispers. Someone was whispering across the room. Who? Who's there? My voice was a whisper too, tiny and frightened. I grabbed my covers and pulled them up to my chin. I heard more whispers. The room came into focus as my eyes adjusted to the dim light. The curtains. The long, sheer curtains from my old room that my mother had hung that afternoon were fluttering at the window. So, that explained the whispers. The billowing curtains must have woken me up. A soft gray light floated in from outside. The curtains cast moving shadows onto the foot of my bed. Yawning, I stretched and climbed out of bed. I felt chilled all over as I crept across the wooden floor to close the window. As I came near, the curtains stopped billowing and floated back into place. I pushed them aside and reached out to close the window. Oh! I uttered a soft cry when I realized that the window was closed. But how could the curtains flutter like that with the window closed? I stood there for a while, staring out at the grays of the night. There wasn't much of a draft. The window seemed pretty airtight. Had I imagined the curtains billowing? Were my eyes playing tricks on me? I hurried back through the strange shadows to my bed and pulled the covers up as high as they would go. Amanda, Stop scaring yourself, I scolded. When I fell back to sleep a few minutes later, I had the ugliest, most terrifying dream. I dreamed that we were all dead. Mom, Dad, Josh, and me. At first, I saw us sitting around the dinner table in the new dining room. The room was very bright. So bright I couldn't see our faces very well. They were just a bright white blur. But then, slowly, slowly, everything came into focus, and I could see that beneath our hair, we had no faces. Our skin was gone, and only our gray-green skulls were left. Bits of flesh clung to my bony cheeks. There were only deep black sockets where my eyes had been. The four of us, all dead, sat eating in silence. Our dinner plates, I saw, were filled with small bones. A big platter in the center of the table was piled high with gray-green bones, human-looking bones. And then, in this dream, our disgusting meal was interrupted by a loud knocking on the door, an insistent pounding that grew louder and louder. It was Kathy, my friend from back home, and I could hear her at our front door, pounding on it with both fists. I wanted to go answer the door. I wanted to run from the dining room and pull open the door and greet Kathy. I wanted to talk to Kathy. I wanted to tell her what had happened to me, to explain that I was dead and that my face had fallen away. I wanted to see Kathy so badly, but I couldn't get up from the table. I tried and tried, but I couldn't get up. The pounding on the door grew louder and louder until it was deafening. But I just sat there with my gruesome family, picking up bones from my dinner plate and eating them. I woke up with a start, the horror of the dream still with me. I could still hear the pounding in my ears. I shook my head, trying to chase the dream away. It was morning. I could tell from the blue of the sky outside the window. Oh no. The curtains. They were billowing again, flapping noisily as they blew into the room. I sat up and stared. The window was still closed. I'll take a look at the window. There must be a draft or a leak or something, Dad said at breakfast. He shoveled in another mouthful of scrambled eggs and ham. But Dad, it's so weird, I insisted, still feeling scared. The curtains were billowing like crazy, and the window was closed. There might be a pane missing, Dad suggested. Amanda is a pain, Josh cracked. His idea was a really witty joke. Don't start with your sister, Mom said, putting her plate down on the table and dropping into her chair. She looked tired. Her black hair, usually carefully pulled back, was disheveled. She tugged at the belt on her bathrobe. Whew! I don't think I slept 2 hours last night. Neither did I said, sighing. I kept thinking about that boy would show up in my room again. Amanda, you've really got to stop this, Mom said sharply. Boys in your room, curtains blowing. You have to realize that you're nervous and your imagination is working overtime. But Mom, I started. Maybe a ghost was behind the curtains, Josh said, teasing. He raised up his hands and made a ghostly ooh. Well, whoa. Mom put a hand on Josh's shoulder. Remember what you promised about scaring each other? It's going to be hard for all of us to adjust to this place, Dad said. You may have dreamed about the curtains blowing, Amanda. You said you had bad dreams, right? The terrifying nightmare flashed back into my mind. Once again, I saw the big platter of bones on the table. I shivered. It's so damp in here, Mom said. A little sunshine will help dry the place out, Dad said. I peered out the window. The sky had turned solid gray. Trees seemed to spread darkness over our backyard. Where's Petey? I asked. Out back, Mom replied, swallowing a mouthful of eggs. He got up early, too. Couldn't sleep, I guess. I lost my place. So I let him out. What are we doing today? Josh asked. He always needed to know the plan for the day, every detail, mainly so he could argue about it. Your father and I still have a lot of unpacking to do, Mom said, glancing to the back hallway, which was cluttered with unopened cartons. You two can explore the neighborhood, see what you can find out. See if there are any other kids your age around. In other words, you want us to get lost, I said. Mom and Dad both laughed. You're very smart, Amanda. But I want to help unpack my stuff, Josh whined. I knew he'd argue with the plan, just like always. Go get dressed and take a long walk, Dad said. Take Petey with you, okay? And take a leash for him. I left one by the front stairs. What about our bikes? Why can't we ride our bikes? Josh asked. They're buried in the back of the garage, Dad told him. You'll never be able to get to them. Besides, you have a flat tire. If I can't ride my bike, I'm not going out, Josh insisted, crossing his arms in front of his chest. Mom and Dad had to argue with him, then threaten him. Finally, he agreed to go for a walk. A short one, it is. I finished breakfast thinking about Kathy and my other friends back home. I wondered what the kids were like here in Dark Falls. I wondered if I'd be able to find new friends. Real friends. I volunteered to do the breakfast dishes since Mom and Dad had so much work to do. The warm water felt soothing on my hands as I sponged the dishes clean. I guess maybe I'm tired, or maybe I'm weird. I like washing dishes. Behind me, from somewhere in the front of the house, I could hear Josh arguing with Dad. I could just barely make out the words over the trickle of the tap water. Your basketball is packed in one of these cartons, Dad was saying. Then Josh said something. Then Dad said, how should I know which one? Then Josh said something. Then Dad said, no, I don't have time to look now. Believe it or not, your basketball isn't at the top of my list. I stacked the last dish on the counter to drain and looked for a dish towel to dry my hands. There was none in sight. I guess they hadn't been unpacked yet. Wiping off my hands on the front of my robe, I headed for the stairs. I'll be dressed in 5 minutes, I called to Josh, who was still arguing with Dad in the living room. Then we can go out. I started up the front stairs, and then stopped. Above me, on the landing, stood a strange girl, about my age, with short, black hair. She was smiling down at me. Not a warm smile, not a friendly smile, but the coldest, most frightening smile I had ever seen. A hand touched my shoulder. I spun around. It was Josh. I'm not going for a walk unless I can take my basketball, he said. Josh, please. I looked back up to the landing and the girl was gone. I felt cold all over. My legs were all trembly. I grabbed the banister. Dad, come here. Please, I called. Josh's face filled with alarm. Hey, I didn't do anything, he shouted. No, it's not you, I said, and called Dad again. Amanda, I'm kinda busy, Dad said, appearing at the foot of the stairs, already perspiring from unpacking living room stuff. Dad, I saw somebody, I told him. Up there. A girl, I pointed. Amanda, please, he replied, making a face. Stop seeing things, okay? There's no one in this house except the four of us, and maybe a few mice. Mice? Josh asked with sudden interest. Really? Where? Dad, I didn't imagine it, I said, my voice cracking. I was really hurt that he didn't believe me. Amanda, look up there, Dad said, gazing up to the landing. What do you see? I followed his gaze. There was a pile of my clothes on the landing. Mom must have just unpacked them. It's just clothes, Dad said impatiently. It's not a girl. It's clothes. He rolled his eyes. Sorry, I said quietly. I repeated it as I started up the stairs. Sorry. I didn't really feel sorry. I felt confused. And still scared. Was it possible that I thought a pile of clothes was a smiling girl? No, I didn't think so. I'm not crazy, and I have really good eyesight. So then what was going on? I opened the door to my room, turned on the ceiling light, and saw the curtains billowing in front of the bay window. Oh no, not again, I thought. I hurried over to them. This time, the window was open. Who opened it? Mom, I guessed. Warm, wet air blew into the room. The sky was heavy and gray. It smelled like rain. Turning to my bed, I had another shock. Someone had laid out an outfit for me. A pair of faded jeans and a pale blue sleeveless t-shirt. They were spread out side by side at the foot of the bed. Who had put them there? Mom? I stood at the doorway and called to her. Mom? Mom? Did you pick out clothes for me? I could hear her shout something from downstairs, but I couldn't make out the words. Calm down, Amanda, I told myself. Calm down. Of course, Mom pulled the clothes out. Of course, Mom put them there. From the doorway, I heard whispering in my closet, whispering and hushed giggling behind the closet door. This was the last straw. What's going on here? I yelled at the top of my lungs. I stormed over to the closet and pulled open the door. Frantically, I pushed clothes out of the way. No one in there. Mice, I thought? Had I heard the mice that Dad was talking about? I've got to get out of here, I said aloud. The room, I realized, was driving me crazy. No, I was driving myself crazy. Imagine all of these weird things. There was a logical explanation for everything. Everything. As I pulled up my jeans and fastened them, I said the word logical over and over in my mind. I said it so many times that it didn't sound like a real word anymore. Calm down, Amanda. Calm down. I took a deep breath and held it to 10. Boo. Josh, cut it out. You didn't scare me, I told him, sounding more cross than I had meant to. Let's get out of here, he said, staring at me from the doorway. This place gives me the creeps. Huh? You too? I exclaimed. What's your problem? He started to say something, then stopped. He suddenly looked embarrassed. Forget it, he muttered. No, tell me, I insisted. What were you going to say? He kicked at the floor molding. I had a really creepy dream last night, he finally admitted, looking past me to the fluttering curtains at the window. A dream? I remembered my horrible dream. Yeah, there were these two boys in my room, and they were mean. What did they do? I asked. I don't remember, Josh said, avoiding my eyes. I just remember they were scary. And what happened? I asked, turning to the mirror to brush my hair. I woke up, he said, and then added impatiently, Come on, let's go. Did the boys say anything to you? I asked. No, I don't think so, he answered thoughtfully. They just laughed. Laughed? Well, giggled, sort of, Josh said. I don't want to talk about it anymore, he snapped. Are we going for this dumb walk or not? Okay, I'm ready, I said, putting down my brush, taking one last look in the mirror. Let's go on this dumb walk. I followed him down the hall. As we passed the stack of clothes on the landing, I thought about the girl I had seen standing there. And I thought about the boy in the window when we first arrived, and the two boys Josh had seen in his dream. I had decided to prove that Josh and I were both really nervous about moving to this new place. Maybe Mom and Dad were right. We were letting our imaginations run away with us. It had to be our imaginations. I mean, what else could it be? Hope you enjoyed these chapters. I'll be back next time with chapter 9.